Dr. Lashmi. All right. So thank you so much for this opportunity and having your faith in me to conduct this webinar and give this talk on a very old but very common topic of RH isoimmunization and managing an RH negative mother. Our crux for today's discussion will be the anti-D prophylaxis, and we'll stress more on the indications of when anti-D prophylaxis has to be given. And let's see if we achieve that purpose today. So moving on. The burden of the disease was recognized once we recognized the RH factor, which was discovered by Landsteiner and Wiener as way back as 80 years back and in 1940. And eventually, the disease of erythroblastosis was confirmed in 1941 and was found to be due to maternal isoimmunization against the paternally foreign inherited fetal factors. And the subsequent development of the effective maternal prophylaxis has brought down the hemolytic disease of newborn and can be attributed to Finn and Associates as late as 1961. So that's impressive. Isoimmunization occurs when a foreign antigen, an individual is presented with a foreign antigen of the same species, and the individual, the index person, is lacking that antigen, and then they develop antibodies against that. So an example, a very common example that we as obstetricians face is when an RH negative mother is pregnant with an RH positive fetus, and she may be sensitized against these RH antigens and develops antibodies, which will eventually cross the placenta and can hemolyze the fetal RBCs while the fetus is in utero. And the causes can be mismatched blood transfusion, which is quite rare to say the least, but yes, still a good possibility when an RH negative woman is bearing an RH positive fetus, and therein fetal-maternal hemorrhage occurs, which is probably not covered by our anti-D prophylaxis. So we already seen that an RH negative mother with an RH positive father, heterozygous or homozygous as the case may be, the father, and the baby is RH positive. And the fetal RBCs eventually separate and then enter the maternal circulation, sensitize the maternal immune system. It happens due to the fetal-maternal hemorrhage, which can occur during pregnancy or around delivery, postpartum. And once these RH negative RBCs of the fetus reach the mother's circulation, and they are perceived as a foreign antigen and provoke an antibody response. And so the initial response will be IgM antibodies, which last for a short period, 6 weeks to 6 months, and eventually the production of the IgG antibodies start. So what happens is that in an ABO compatible mother fetus, we'll see about that again. In an ABO compatible mother and fetus combination, a good 2% of the mothers are sensitized around delivery, and a good 7% are sensitized till 6 months postpartum. So once this IgG antibody comes into play, a good majority of the mothers are sensitized at that time. So antibodies to fetal RBCs, usually the first child is not affected, but here is this theory, which is like a very interesting Viva questions also, because we are in medical college and we love Viva questions. So here is this grandmother theory, where an RH negative mother herself, when she is a fetus, she is in the womb of her mother, and she is receiving RH positive cells from her mother. And that is when, while she is still in utero, her immune system is sensitized against the RH positive cells. So here is this grandmother theory. The grandmother is responsible for mounting the immune response in the mother against the grandchild. So here is this grandmother theory, wherein even the first child can be affected, even with no history of a mismatched blood transfusion. So there is that grandmother theory. And repeated pregnancy, of course, provoke a higher and higher IgG antibody levels in the mother. And these cross the placenta, reach the fetal circulation with a more detrimental and a worsening outcome in subsequent pregnancies. And of course, they destroy the fetal RBCs, leading to hemolysis. So the risk of postpartum immunization increases with the amount of fetal-maternal hemorrhage. And for a secondary immune response, as little as 0.05 ml of RH positive RBCs are also enough. And here is this thing that we were talking about. The risk is about 16% for the first RH ABO compatible pregnancy. The mother and the baby are RH and ABO compatible. The ones which are incompatible the mother and the fetus are incompatible ABO wise, they have a lesser risk because there is rapid clearance of these fetal cells in the maternal circulation even when they cross the placenta. So there is this concept of sensibilized women, sensibilization. A D negative woman delivering a D positive ABO compatible infant has a likelihood of isoimmunization of 16%. We just saw that. 2% are immunized at the time of delivery, 7% as late as 6 months postpartum. Okay, we spoke about it a while back. And the remaining 7% will be sensibilized. What it means is that the anti-D antibodies are not detectable. They are too low to be detected during or after the index pregnancy, but they are identified very, very easily early in a subsequent pregnancy. And you wonder that you did everything for the postpartum, even maybe antenatal prophylaxis in the first pregnancy. And here we are dealing with the second pregnancy where the mother is now ICT positive. So therein lies this concept of sensibilized Rh negative mothers. So here there's this diagram where there's a primary immune response with IgM antibodies, and then there's the rapid higher antibody response, a secondary response wherein there are IgG antibodies. So why is it called erythroblastosis fetalis? Okay, so what happens is that there are anti-D, anti-Rh, anti-D antibodies crossing from the mother to the fetus. These antibodies coat the fetal RBCs. There is destruction of the fetal RBCs by the fetal reticuloendothelial system. Now, here is this concept that the reticuloendothelial system of the fetus is not mature till 16 to 18 weeks. Okay, so even though the fetal RBCs are coated by the maternal antibodies, the reticuloendothelial system is not mature. It is not going to destroy these RBCs, and these coated RBCs are going to remain in circulation. Okay, this is the reason why we will never see high drops before 18 weeks of gestation, because even these coated RBCs are still circulating in the circulation. Once the reticuloendothelial system matures, it'll start destroying these RBCs. And that's when the fetal anemia occurs. And then there is fetal hypoxia, there is stimulation by erythropoietin, and extramedullary red cell synthesis starts. And now, because more and more demand of RBCs is there for the fetal circulation, more and more of these immature RBCs are being thrown into the circulation, thrown into the peripheral circulation. And we know that these immature fetal RBCs and the whole erythropoiesis process are erythroblasts. Hence, the name erythroblastosis fetalis. So we know that we are not going to see high drops before 16 to 18 weeks before the fetal RE system matures. And after that, we have a lot of erythroblasts being thrown into the circulation. And in spite of that, if the fetal anemia continues, the fetus will eventually land up in hydropsitis and all the third space losses. A lot of the maternal isoimmunization can be attributed to the amount of fetal-maternal hemorrhage. Most of us, all of us know that the routinely that we give the prophylaxis for anti-D, it covers a certain amount of fetal-maternal hemorrhage. But yes, there are certain events that we are aware of. We will kind of summarize and revisit those sensitizing events where the fetal-maternal hemorrhage can be expected to be more. We might miss such patients. And we know that most of them occur postpartum, but here are a few events which can still lead to a fetal-maternal hemorrhage in the first trimester, in the second or the third trimester. About the hemolytic disease of newborn, we know that it's a burden that we still bear sometimes, and we might miss such cases. And if we have a case of hydros fetalis actually coming in, we have already missed a chance to prevent this HDN in the fetus. And the whole aim, the whole premise of today's talk is to prevent such cases. Looking at the global burden of Rh negative and the mothers and eventually giving birth to HDN babies, the neonatal death due to Rh disease is still quite high in South Asian countries like India. And to look at the Indian problem, to look at the burden in India, Casey Joseph from CMC Vellore, they actually used disease regression techniques to look at the anti-D immunoglobulin requirement for a year. And it was expected to be around 8 lakh doses postpartum and around 4.5 doses post-abortion. However, the total number of units of the anti-D that were sold in the Indian market in the same year were only 1,15,000. So there was a gross underutilization of anti-D prophylaxis in India. So the major reason can still be attributed to the failure to administer postnatal anti-D prophylaxis, but almost 50% of those cases followed by a failure to administer anti-D after MTP. Okay, so still a lot of ground to cover. With postpartum prophylaxis, the risk of isoimmunization will reduce to 1.5%. And further, if we give the routine antenatal anti-D prophylaxis, that can reduce the risk to 0.18%. So this gap is something that we can still aim to bridge. In the state-wise distribution of where the burden lies, Maharashtra lies at 5%. So the prevalence in terms state-wise prevalence, and we are not too high there like the other states which have like a 10 or 8%, but we are not as low as the Seven Sisters and the West Bengal here, which are being quite impressive. Look at the sensitizing events. We have first trimester bleeding or miscarriage. Most of us know this, we are just revising here, and medical or surgical termination of first trimester pregnancy, ectopic pregnancies, vesicular mole. We don't know the aneuploidy in the vesicular mole. Second trimester MTPs, antepartum hemorrhage, external cephalic version, closed abdominal injury, blunt trauma, intrauterine fetal death, normal or cesarean section. So yes, of course, I mean, we do still 50% of conversions, isoimmunization still happen during normal deliveries. MROP, manual removal of placenta, twin deliveries, slightly higher chances, mismatched platelet or blood transfusion, quite rare, but still there. So when we are looking at an Rh negative mother, we look at her blood group, Rh typing, and antibody screening in the index visit, in the first antenatal visits. And of course, look at her husband's blood group. We are still not at a point where we look at the heterozygosity or the homozygosity of the husband's blood group, Rh positive. Of course, that's when we'll be concerned. If the husband's blood group is Rh negative, that's the end of story there. But we are still not, in India, the resources and the healthcare is not at a point where we look at the heterozygosity or the homozygosity of the husband's blood group. And then we are a long way from looking at the fetal RBCs in the maternal circulation, which has kind of revolutionized the way we look at Rh negative mothers in European and Western countries. So yes, Rh negative mothers, we look at the husband's blood group, and then we look at the presence of any antibodies in the serum of the mother. So we do what is called as, of course, the ICT, the indirect Coombs test. So this is very basic, but it took me a long time in my residency, probably even after my residency, to really understand this simple concept that indirect Coombs test and direct Coombs test. Indirect Coombs test looks at the mother, it's done on the mother. Direct Coombs test is done on the neonate. So what indirect Coombs test does is to detect anti-D antibodies in the mother's serum, free-flowing anti-D antibodies. The ICT does that. The direct Coombs test, it detects the anti-D antibody, which is coating the Rh positive RBCs of the fetus. Okay, of the neonate, I'm sorry. Okay, so I mean, like just to summarize, indirect Coombs test done on the serum circulating antibodies, direct Coombs test done on the neonate to look at RBCs which are coated with anti-D antibodies. Okay, basic concept. So screening and diagnosis, one of the ways in which the management of Rh negative pregnancies has been revolutionized is because of the middle cerebral artery peak systolic velocity. And kind of in many ways, today we are probably just scratching the surface, but to have an overall view of how to approach an Rh negative pregnancy, here we are. So we look at the MCA PSV, peak systolic velocity, and it is non-invasive, correlates very well with the severity of fetal anemia. And then we have chordocentesis, where we are actually contemplating intrauterine fetal transfusions to detect fetal anemia. And we do those tests, and then we transfuse at the same time when the fetus is still not reached maturity or salvageability. USG, detection of hydrops fetalis. Honestly, if we will not do diagnosis or screening, but diagnosis of an Rh negative mother by finding in a hydrops fetalis baby. No, I think we have already missed a chance to do anything fruitful for this pregnancy if we are detecting a hydrops fetalis baby. We've already missed, the baby is already in a lot of anemia. So our diagnosis should have been much earlier with an ICT testing. So chorion sampling, this is what we were talking about for the fetal Rh genotype, which this non-invasive test has also been made redundant by looking at fetal DNA, fetal RBCs, I'm sorry, in the maternal peripheral circulation. So amniocentesis, this is of historical significance, being mentioned here to detect the amniotic fluid bilirubin, invasive, brought forth by Lilly, and we do not do this anymore, only for detection of how much the fetus has been affected. We don't do this anymore. As far as management is concerned, we look at which pregnancy is high risk to prevent a fetus from being severely affected. The fetus is being severely affected, to pick up the baby before severe anemia develops and correct anemia and reverse hydrops. Hydrops reverses once we do intrauterine transfusions, and to deliver the baby at an appropriate designated time, weighing the risks and consequences against the prematurity and the risk of intrauterine death. So the objective is to, in a non-immunized women, we try and prevent alloimmunization, and in immunized women, we try and detect early and treat the fetal anemia if and when it develops. So we screen all mothers for blood group, screen all mothers, Rh negative mothers, if they have antibodies, and administer anti-D immunoglobulin prophylaxis for women who are not ICU immunized. Okay, so all Rh negative mothers after delivery, if the neonate is Rh positive, we give anti-D prophylaxis within 72 hours, and all sensitizing events within 72 hours. I think before we go on to this, let's have a look at this. So look at the first trimester events. Significant bleeding during threatened abortion. There is the guideline which the RCOG suggests that in the first trimester, if there is a threatened abortion and there is bleeding, but the pregnancy continues, there is no indication to give anti-D prophylaxis. However, the FOXI ICOG recommends that it's always safe to give, even in threatened abortion, even if the pregnancy continues, you give anti-D prophylaxis. Spontaneous miscarriage, yes. Medical termination of pregnancy, yes. Anti-D to be given as soon as misoprostol administration. Surgical termination of pregnancy, ectopic pregnancy, VMOL, any procedures invasive, chorion villus biopsy, embryo reduction. In all these events, a dose of 50 to 100 micrograms should be given as soon as possible after the sensitizing event. As far as the second trimester is concerned, apart from the sensitizing event, there is this concept of RAADP, routine antenatal anti-D prophylaxis. All patients should be tested for RS sensitization at the time of registration and again at 28 weeks. If they are not sensitized, there are two things that you can do. Either you give a single dose of 300 microgram at 28 weeks, or you split, give 100 microgram at 28 and repeat at 34 weeks. Okay, these recommendations are coming in from the FOXI ICOG recommendation panel, and the difference being that this is recommended. This is recommendation, not only offered nowadays. So there is a difference. Postpartum anti-D prophylaxis definitely recommended, has to be given, but routine antenatal anti-D prophylaxis was something which was offered to the patients. Nowadays, the FOXI ICOG is recommending routine antenatal anti-D prophylaxis. Women with weak D, also known as D positive, need not receive anti-D, and it is desirable to offer antenatal prophylaxis to all Rh negative women who are not sensitized and have an Rh positive partner. About the second trimester sensitizing event, amniocentesis, abruptio placentae, blunt trauma, intrauterine fetal death, external cephalic eversion, and eventually the pregnancy continues, and placenta previa with bleeding. So once first trimester is crossed, all of these will receive 300 microgram at least. And of course, we have the postpartum prophylaxis. Either by normal or cesarean, we all give 300 microgram within 72 hours. If we miss the 72 hours window, we can give it as late as 28 days. So we do not, if we really do miss that golden window, the patient still qualifies for the anti-D prophylaxis postpartum. Testing for the size of fetal-maternal hemorrhage. In India, a standard postnatal dose of 300 microgram is used with no requirement for the routine Kleihauer-Betke test. And it does not take into account the fact that up to 0.3% of these women will have a fetal-maternal hemorrhage greater than 15 ml of fetal RBCs. Why I'm saying this is because that 300 microgram of anti-D, it takes care of either 30 ml of fetal blood or 15 ml of fetal RBCs. But we do not really, we are not into the routine process of quantifying the fetal-maternal hemorrhage. We just need to understand that there are certain events which cause increased fetal-maternal hemorrhage, either during normal delivery or during cesarean section, like if you're doing an MROP or if you're doing instrumental deliveries. Such events do cause an increased fetal-maternal hemorrhage, and there are certain obstetricians who practice extraperitoneal cesarean section so that there is no spillage of fetal blood into the maternal peritoneal cavity. So we just need to understand that there are certain events which can cause increased fetal maternal hemorrhage, and up to 50% of these larger fetal maternal hemorrhage occur during normal deliveries. So it's not the case that cesarean section causes more fetal maternal hemorrhage as compared to normal delivery. No, that is not true. The tests that can be done to test for fetal-maternal hemorrhage are the Kleihauer-Betke test, or the flow cytometry, or the rosetting technique. All three of these are done in European countries. Flow cytometry is which is easily reproducible, and they do it. However, there is poor evidence regarding testing for postpartum FMH, as the cost benefit of such testing has not been determined. These are the FOXY ICOG recommendations. Talking about the monoclonal antibody, these are, so here we are comparing the monoclonal versus the polyclonal. We'll just have a brief look at what these are and then look at the recommendations which are coming in. So monoclonal is highly specific antibody, and it is derived from the single hybridoma cells, and it is developed in the laboratory. The advantage is specific, it's consistent, it's uniform, and it is safe from the CGD virus and harmful proteins, which the polyclonal antibody source can be a risk. So the features are, it is manufactured by the hybridoma technology. There is no pooled plasma. So what happens in polyclonal antibodies is that there are certain people, in women, no premenopausal women is taken. So what happens is that the Rh negative people are kind of exposed to Rh positive cells, RBCs, and they mount an antibody response, and the anti-D antibodies are pulled from such people's sera. And that's why that's like a polyclonal antibody. Okay, so as opposed to that, the monoclonal antibody is not a pooled plasma. Okay, it is developed in the laboratory by the hybridoma technology, provides of course monoclonal antibody. There is no batch to batch variation. There are no limitations to its production. It could be unlimited. There are no risks of the CJD virus or the parvovirus infection, and it is a higher specific action, no shortages. Of course, we saw that, and it is safe. So one of the disadvantages of the monoclonal antibody is that it may not cover all the epitopes of the D antigen. It may not cover. That is one major, and there could be a batch to batch variation. Certain studies have come up with the batch to batch variation. However, we look at the recommendations. We just saw that polyclonal antibodies is derived from sera of immunized humans, Rh negative humans who are exposed with the Rh positive cell. So the problem is there are legal constraints to doing that. You can't simply just catch hold of Rh negative humans and go on immunizing them with Rh positive cells. So they're made of mixture of antibodies with affinity to a wide range of antigenic epitopes. This is what we were talking about right now, about the monoclonal antibodies, that it probably may not cover all the epitopes. It is difficult to manufacture in large quantities. There are constraints because the source is limited. It is difficult to provide consistent batches. And of course, transmission of infections and harmful proteins is there. Monoclonal antibodies are in the phase 3 clinical trials, and two of these trials, one was done in Sion Hospital, LTMG Hospital, and in KEM hospitals, and they were immunized, and the titers were taken till 180 days, and the results were evaluated with ICT, and it was found that monoclonal anti-D is effective in prevention of sensitization. Similar trial was done for the safety and efficacy in GSMC, KEM Hospital, and so group 1 consisted of 80 patients, all given monoclonal antibody, and group 2 consisted of 30 were given monoclonal and 30 were given polyclonal, and titers were taken by ICT at 180 days. And it was found to be effective in prevention of sensitization. The FOXY ICOG guidelines, these are the statements that have been taken. Monoclonal preparations of which supply they are not in short supply. theoretically they are limitless, should in principle replace the polyclonal anti-D. The recommendation, however, for now, the recommendation should still be towards polyclonal injection is what they are saying. However, polyclonal products have to gradually phase out because the future is the monoclonal antibody. We have already looked at these guidelines. All of these, the ACOG, the RCOG, the FOXI, and the British Society for the Hematology, NHS, all of them recommend postpartum prophylaxis, and almost all of them recommend the routine antenatal antibody prophylaxis also. A very brief look at the management of an isoimmunized mother. It is not really the premise of today's talk to talk in detail about how to manage an immunized mother, an Rh negative mother who is already positive for the anti-D antibodies, but here's taking a brief look at it. Once alloimmunization has occurred, the fetus is at risk from anemia. Risk increases as the antibody titer increases. So what we will do is that once we find ICT is positive in the mother, it's a qualitative test. We request for titers that will be quantitative. We'll look at how much dilution the serum is still coming positive for the ICT, and the dilutional titers are given in ratio. So once the mother is positive for ICT, we look at the titers. If the titers are not critical, we will go on checking every 4 weeks. The critical titer depends on the lab and the hospital. Every lab and hospital has to designate their own critical titer, which is usually 1:16 or 1:32. Once we reach the critical titer of 1:16 or 1:32, we start taking a look at the fetal MCA Doppler, middle cerebral artery, peak systolic velocity. If we go only by the titer concentration, here in India, we follow the titer ratio. If we look at the absolute antibody level, a threshold value of 15 international units per ml has been recommended for invasive testing. We go ahead with chordosynthesis, actually look at the fetal hemoglobin and plan an intra-uterine transfusion together with it. So we go for invasive testing as only mild hemolytic disease is noted with antibody levels below this value. Velocimetry of the fetal MCA, middle cerebral artery, to monitor the affected pregnancy, revolutionize the management, how we look at how we manage Rh negative mothers. And we have nomograms of MCA PSV, gestational age specific nomograms. So the peak systolic velocity is usually denoted in terms of MOMs, multiples of median. We have the gestational age here, we have the mean here, the median, and then we have the multiples of median here. Okay, so we look at the multiples of median. I'm sorry? We are almost about to finish the lecture. So the peak systolic velocity is greater than 1.5 multiples of medians, are very, for specific gestations, are predictive of moderate or severe fetal anemia with 100% sensitivity. So we take this as the cutoff for when the fetus has to be sent to a fetal medicine expert for intrauterine transfusions, for invasive testing, depending on the gestational age. If we have a near-term fetus, we don't really, we kind of target towards terminating the pregnancy. But if we have a non-salvageable fetus, then we can think about intrauterine tests, intrauterine fetal transfusions, and invasive chordosynthesis. Pregnancies at risk should be monitored on a weekly basis. We look at the MCA PSV on the weekly basis. And Doppler, of course, we just saw that Doppler ultrasound of the MCA correlates very well with the fetal anemia and with increasing levels of bilirubin in the amniotic fluid. So just to summarize, prevalence of Rh negative population ranges anywhere between 5 to 15%. And Rh positive babies, sensitized Rh negative mother, and high risk of developing HDN. Interesting thing is that none of these feti ever are born with jaundice. They are never born with jaundice. They just develop rapidly jaundice within the next 24 hours because of the beautiful organ that placenta is. It provides for what is needed, it scavenges for what is not needed, and takes care of whatever is toxic to the baby, including the bilirubin. So as long as the baby is within the womb, within the uterus, it's not going to develop kernicterus. It's not going to have higher bilirubin levels. The placenta is taking care of that. Of course, it will have anemia, but bilirubin is being taken care of the placenta. It is never born icteric. It develops icterus rapidly. Sensitization in Rh negative mother can be prevented by anti-D prophylaxis in the antenatal and in the postpartum period and sensitizing events. Monoclonal antibody preparations are the future. They have the advantages of specificity, uniformity, consistency, and they are comparable in terms of cost. And management of sensitized Rh negative pregnancy requires frequent monitoring. We all know that, and expertise of the fetal medicine expert. Thank you so much for this opportunity today. And I thank my department and Bharat Serums for today's opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot to elaborate this topic in such a nice and simple way. That is Rh isotonification and anti-D prophylaxis. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Today, ma'am, we have the many respected names, respected doctors from Aurangabad. Today we have Dr. Rajendra Singh Pardeshi, Dr. Lakshmi ma'am, Dr. Swati Shiratkar ma'am, Dr. Ajay Mane, Dr. Anuradha Shevale ma'am, Dr. Vishaka Deshpande ma'am, Archana Gadkari ma'am, Kunal Jadhav sir, also Meeta Bilgi ma'am. So we have today really eminent doctors from Aurangabad. So anyone want to speak?
It's my honor that Pardeshi sir and Anuradha Shivai ma'am and all the senior people are here. Meeta Bilgi ma'am, thank you so much for attending.
We are very fortunate.
Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Welcome.
With your permission, sir, Dr. Anupriya narrated very nicely this topic. Actually, she has explained very nicely the process of FMH, role of Coombs test, and antenatal and postnatal management, and basically management of sensitized Rh negative mother.
Sir, we can't hear you.
Yes, she has explained the newer modalities like intrauterine transfusion and intravenous immunoglobulins, which that may help further to reduce the overall mortality and morbidity. And about this,
excuse me,
in general also, they have combined with antepartum and postpartum immunoprophylaxis a further decline in the incidence of Rh negative. And so the perinatal mortality can be lowered down. Very, very nice talk by Dr. Anupriya. She has explained very nicely.
We have a lot of fetal medicine experts, sir, who can actually elaborate a lot more on the management.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words.
Dr. Swati ma'am is also here. Ma'am, we really would like to hear something from you, ma'am, also from Dr. Lakshmi.
Yes, thank you. And Anupriya, it was really, as Dr. Rajendra Singh has told, that usually what happens that because we don't conduct at our place, we don't usually go for further modalities. And then it becomes like just a ritual. But then today it was a very simple way of explaining all these things.
Thank you,
and the importance of monoclonal antibodies. That is also a very good thing, the good way that you have explained very nicely.
Thank you, ma'am.
It was a nice explanation.
Yes, Anuradha ma'am. You can unmute, ma'am.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir.
This is Dr. Ajay Mane.
Yes, sir.
Hello, Anu. It was excellent as usual, and you are a very good speaker. The flow and knowledge was very nice, and you explained all the aspects as sir said very well. Congrats. Thank you. Thank you for the lecture.
Thank you for attending.
Anuradha ma'am also raised the hand. Ma'am, if you want to speak, please unmute and you can speak, ma'am.
Yeah.
Also, you can on your video also, ma'am.
Hello.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Hello.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hello, Anupriya. It was excellent talk.
Thank you, ma'am.
I have one question. Like, there are a few patients who have conceived with ART. They have recurrent bleeding in first trimester. So if the blood group is negative, then how many times we have to give the NTD? Like they may come frequently with the bleeding.
Yes, ma'am. So basically, the recommendations are if the bleeding continues below 12 weeks, if the bleeding is there, but the pregnancy continues. So in these cases of threatened abortion, they actually recommend not to give, it's not, NTD is not required. However, to be on the safe side, the first trimester NTD prophylaxis dose of 50 to 100 microgram is still recommended by FOXY ICOG. And once it has been given, they say that there is no need to repeat it for the next 8 to 12 weeks, even with continued bleed. But ma'am Shiraka ma'am and Lakshmi ma'am are there, and I know both of them are dons in this in this particular topic. So I would like to hear their view also.
Yeah, you already told the guidelines. So it is better in today's era that we should go by guidelines, isn't it?
So do we have the talk by Mr. Chandar Venkatraman sir?
Yes,
Or-
yes, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Over to you, sir. Dr.
I think,
Hello, Chandar, sir.
yes. Sriram, you can run the video.
Yes.
As you are running the video, possibly once the video is run, possibly after that I can speak. Because a video doesn't have an audio, man. The issue what we have is the video doesn't have a proper audio, but audio is not needed. So once the video is completed, possibly I can explain this further, what kind of a journal, what kind of a data or content. Some of the examples I can give you, key content examples I can give you, what this hub is all about, to give some examples in terms of knowledge access. Fine. And first and foremost, ma'am, as this is a knowledge hub, ma'am. Typically, it's a knowledge hub. It is a storehouse of all access to index journals, CME, multiple things. As you see, ma'am, as you keep seeing, you will understand that. As you have seen, you can review and publish your work also on this portal. All we need to do is just log in. I think my colleagues will send you the link, the URL link. You need to log in and register yourself. You will get a activation OTP, and using that OTP activation, you have to validate your mail ID. What I will now speak, ma'am, would be something to do with broadly about some of the examples for content. Some of the contents available with bsvwithyou.com, Women's Health and Fertility, is the following, ma'am. Fine. The Congress report, for example, the Congress report, Yeshare virtual 36th annual meeting, or the latest meeting that happened, 27th World Congress on Controversies in Obstetrics and Gynecology, that is COGI. Fine. Then you have infographic topics like uterine atony, related postpartum hemorrhage, key facts about management of infertility. Then you have flashcards, which speaks about heat stable carbetocin and treatment of PPH, approaches to management of infertility, maternal transmission of COVID, for example, 2020 pregnancy outcomes after ART for unexplained fertility, and some of the webinar contents, current trends and recurrent miscarriages, management of RH negative women, expert opinion, selecting the best embryo, poor responders, Poseidon classification, poor ovarian reserve, OHS free clinic antagonist, the game changer, video vault. You have a separate video vault on it, which is on endometriosis and infertility. And you have clinical based quizzes as well, like on uterine fibroids. You have HRT in IOL, dysfunctional uterine bleeding. Then you have clinical guidelines on advances and strategies in ovarian trigger. Then multiple articles you have, ma'am. Like for example, management of recurrent pregnancy loss by immunotherapy, POS and body mass index, expert dialogues you have, patient case simulation, for example, you have why a patient has not been able to conceive in the last 10 years, a few of the patient case simulations. And some of the journals, ma'am, index journal publications, fine. Right from sterility, fertility and sterility, International Journal of Women's Health, International Perspective on Sexual and Reproductive Health, urogynecology, family and reproductive health, gynecological oncology, human fertility, academic pediatric, International Journal of Reproductive Biomedicine, to name a few, ma'am, for example, fine. And some of the very interesting ebooks, what you will have access. I'm just giving a few examples, ma'am. Ebooks, what you will have is infertility. One of the famous publisher you would have heard of, Nova Science Publishers, which is from Nascimento and Enrique. Then male sexual dysfunction and neurological diseases, pregnancy and obesity, drugs and pregnancy and lactation, operative techniques in gynecological surgery, obstetrics and gynecology, 3D ultrasound and prenatal diagnosis, developmental assessment, new technologies for managing labors, John Hopkins management of gynecology and obstetrics. So like this, ma'am, multiple textbook. I think I'm just naming a few, very, very few I'm naming. Diabetes and pregnancy dilemma, for example, newborn screening systems, perinatal medicine, geriatric medicine, you name it, you will, many of it you will have. You will have something fundamental as Manual of Obstetrics by Evans and Emily, for example, to give an example. So therefore, I would suggest, ma'am, I think for all of you to have access to it and benefit, I think I would strongly suggest, implore each one of you to register it ASAP, ma'am. This is exclusively portal meant for gynecologist and obstetrician, and it is segmented into fertility, whether it is about fertility or endoscopic surgery or obstetrics or fetal medicine, you will have it, most of it. And you will have a chat box which will help you also to take you or navigate through. Fine. So I hope you like it. It has got nothing to do with the product. It has something to do with not purely a knowledge hub devoted for your investment and knowledge enhancement. I hope all of you may like it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That information will be particularly useful for our PG residents. So thank you for that. And
yes, ma'am. And today we have some of your students also. So if anyone have any query, any doubt, if you want to ask to Dr. Anupriya, please unmute and you can ask, or you can put your query in chat box also. Ma'am, one query is there from Dr. Kunal Jadhav.
Yeah, one of my doctor patients repeated her indirect Coombs test on her own and after our AADP, and she came positive. That depends, as in probably she would have been a sensibilized patient, and probably that RADP didn't really help her, in the sense it was redundant to give her. Probably she was sensibilized. So that is the only explanation I can find, because of fetal-maternal hemorrhage, which was undetected, which could not have been taken care of by the RAADP, and then she becoming ICT positive, that looks a little far-fetched. So the only explanation I can say is that she must have been sensibilized. That's the only explanation I can think of.
Sir, you can unmute and you can speak. Dr. Kunal. Okay. Maybe any technical issue sir is having.
Maybe.
Yes, maybe. Today we have Dr. Gitanjali Belekar ma'am also from Mumbai.
Oh, Gitanjali was my
Yes.
senior at KEM. Is Gitanjali there?
Yes. Gitanjali ma'am is here. Ma'am, please
Hi.
unmute.
Hi Anupriya,
Hi,
very nice
Gitanjali.
lecture.
Very nice of you to attend this. I'm so
Yeah.
glad you are here.
Yeah, very nice lecture. Huh? Nicely, we have covered everything.
Thank you, Gitanjali. I know you are very active, so if I'll really take that as a compliment because I know you are an ocean of knowledge yourself. So
Arey,
thank you. So thank you.
Dr. Kunal, you want to say something, sir?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
No, it's okay. Actually, for the same, I see, I go through that RCOG guidelines. With that guidelines, hello.
We are listening. You are audible.
With that, yeah. With that guideline, I came across one point was there. They mentioned in that guideline, after giving the routine antenatal anti-D prophylaxis, your test may come positive for a shorter duration of time. So it should not be done within a short span of the time after taking the routine antenatal anti-D prophylaxis.
I was not unmuted. They do not recommend doing an ICT after giving the routine antenatal anti-D prophylaxis.
Yeah,
So
same.
I think she did it by
As
herself.
you,
And,
yeah, that.
What I thought probably she had increasing titers or something. So that is inexplicable. But her ICT can very well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Because it has that passive antibodies in her serum.
Yes.
That may be the responsible for that indirect home test to be positive.
So
That may be the one of the
the
reasons.
lab is made aware that the patient has received.
Yes. That point I want to raise.
Yes.
The lab should be aware of that fact.
So sometimes what happens is that she might have had a sensitizing event in the first trimester, and we gave her anti-D prophylaxis.
No. She had that indirect home test before taking the prophylaxis. But as she was doing one more blood report, so she sent it afterwards also.
Acha.
And
But
she turned out to be positive.
Yes, you can actually distinguish between the passive antibodies which have been given, which have been like administered as a prophylaxis from her own antibodies. There are the labs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That was very nice lecture, madam.
Thank you, Kunal.
As always, concise and crisp with crisp points.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Vijay. Hello. Sir, would you like to add something?
No, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
To add to, if I can add something, ma'am, as Dr. Kunal was saying, for British guidelines also speak about that, and RCOG also speaks about not doing ICT, IDCT for 21 days or 3 weeks after immunization or after administering of anti-D.
So
yes, ma'am. So so last but not least, again, I'm requesting you, if anyone want to ask something, please unmute, or we'll end up this session.
Last but not the least, I would like to put in a word of appreciation for Mr. Krishna Gadkar. He has been the our point of contact always in MJ Medical College. And I want to say that he has shown unrelenting support for our patients for any of the products which are needed from Bharat Serums. And I really want to extend my appreciation. So thank you, Mr. Krishna Gadkar.
Yes, Krishna is also here, but on behalf of, yes, Krishna.
So that is wonderful about
yes,
you commenting on by BSV colleague, man. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. So, for finally time comes, we will now end this session.
Sriram, before you end, I would suggest, I think if we can have access to all their mobile numbers, we can share the URL for bsvwithyou.com. And Krishna, if you can help in each one of them register, it will be of great help, possibly.
Yes, sir, definitely.
And more and as days progress, we are going to enrich it with more and more content. It will be exclusively meant for women's health. So I encourage each one of you to register, please. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So finally, thank you to all the attendees who spare their valuable time from their busy schedule. Thanks a lot to Dr. Anupriya ma'am also for such a nice celebration and such an informative session. Thanks a lot, ma'am. And
Thank you. The honor was entirely mine. Thank you.
but finally, during this pandemic situation, requesting you, please already we are taking care, but please take utmost care of yourself as well as your family members, as you are all the medical fraternity. So most important to take care of yourselves and stay safe. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye.